Hello, my name is Gokey Gamer, coach of the Milwaukee Medichams, and this is log number 4 of testing the power of these Paradox Pokemon for Professor Turo. I have been recruited by the professor to help gather intel on these iron Pokemon by battling with them in the Soul Dew Association, and in exchange I have been promised a championship title, as these Pokemon are just that powerful. This week we're going to be going up against a new opponent, Gengarheracross, coach of the Spine-Chilling Gengars. Personally, I'm excited to see what this coach and his team can do since we have never battled before. And this is our first league together. Speaking of his team, it consists of a Spectrier, Glimmora, Ting-Lu, Infamous Incarnate, Slowbro, Hisuian Arcanine, a Cyclizar, Flamigo, and Galvantula. Well hey, what do you know, looks like we found the professor's missing Cyclizar. The Tera captains consist of Arcanine with the Tera Ground, Fairy, and Grass types, and Flamigo with the Tera Fighting, Flying, and Steel types. This is definitely going to be one of our toughest challenges so far, as the Tera captains, the hazard stacking combo of Glimmora and Ting-Lu, and the always lingering Spectrier can prove to be quite a powerful force to be reckoned with. In terms of what I'm expecting to show up, I'm thinking it's going to be Tera Grass Arcanine, Spectrier, Glimmora, Hisuian and possibly something like Slowbro, Ting-Lu, or Infamous to round things out. We've got quite an exciting battle ahead of us, so allow me to log in the Pokemon that I'm bringing and why I'm bringing them this week. The first Pokemon I'm bringing is a Pokemon who has a pretty decent matchup in this game, King the Weavile. Holding the Clear Amulet to prevent and intimidate from Arcanine and Galvantula's sticky webs, we've got the moves Knock Off, Triple Axle, Swords Dance, and Low Kick. The first 3 moves are pretty self-explanatory. You've seen this set before, you know what it does. Low Kick is also there for Hisuian and Ting-Lu. We've also got enough speed to outspeed a max speed Cyclizar. Hopefully this set really pops off this week because it does look quite solid in this game, especially if Arcanine clicks the Tera Grass or Ground button. The next Pokemon that we're bringing is the Tera captain that put in work last week, Carboniferous the Yanmega. This week he's holding the Throat Spray to raise our special attack to +1 after using a Tera Bug, Tinted Lens boosted Bug Buzz. We've also got Air Slash and Shadow Ball for coverage, as well as the move Tailwind for when I predict a switch to double my speed and be the fastest Pokemon on the field. We've also got Max Special Attack and Max Speed to speed tie in Arcanine. This set is meant to come in and claim a few lives, most likely in the mid to late game. Hopefully this beast can do what he did last week and just one-shot Pokemon right and left. Our third Pokemon we're bringing this week is, to absolutely nobody's surprise, First Class the Iron Valiant. Holding the Booster Energy this week after the results of last week's game, we've got the moves Moonblast, Aurasphere, Calm Mind, and Psyshock. Our booster energy will boost our speed, outspeeding everything on my opponent's team minus the Scarf Cyclizar or Spectrier as long as webs aren't on the field. But even if we don't have the booster energy active, we still outspeed a max speed Galvantula and Infamous. Similar to our first 2 brings, this Pokemon is meant to switch in and claim lives this week, so hopefully First Class will be able to finally break out into the spotlight, as the professor is still leading more research on this Pokemon specifically. Next up on the team is going to be none other than Tumbler the Bramblegast. Holding the heavy duty boots this week, this is our first form of hazard removal with the moves Poltergeist, Power Whip, Rapid Spin, and Shadow Sneak. Max HP and attack look quite nice into my opponent's team, as this set isn't meant to win the game, but helps support other Pokemon on my team and get rid of possible spikes, toxic spikes, rocks, and webs my opponent might want to set up. We've also got the ability Wind Rider, mainly for synergy with Tailwind from Carboniferous. I think Tumbler looks quite nice this week, so hopefully he'll have the chance to shine. After Tumbler is our other form of hazard removal, as well as a Pokemon that might just win the game for us, Hive Mind the Mousehold. Coming back onto the team after their fantastic week 2 performance, we've got the moves Population Bomb, Low Kick, Tidy Up, and Bullet Seed, with max attack and enough speed to outspeed Galvantula, as well as the Wide Lens to make sure we don't miss our Population Bombs. Pop Bomb and Tidy Up are self-explanatory, Low Kick is there for the same reason as Weavile, and Bullet Seed is there for Tera Ground Arcanine, Slowbro, and Glimmora. Hive Mind really proved how useful they can be during their debut game. Perhaps they'll be able to steal the show once again this week. And finally, rounding out this team, we've got Derp the Quagsire once again. Holding the Rindo Berry for a surprise Tera Grass Arcanine, we've got the Unaware ability with the moves Earth Power, Ice Beam, Recover, and Toxic with max HP and defense. This is meant to stop my opponent from sweeping or stalling, as Derp can prevent sweepers with Unaware and stallers with Toxic. Earth Power and Ice Beam is also fantastic coverage against almost all of my opponent's team, which is quite nice. Perhaps Derp will have a chance to shine this week after all. And that is the complete team we're bringing for this match. While we are 3-0, that doesn't mean we will guarantee win this game, so we've got to battle to our best of abilities. Regardless, I will go ahead and end the team preview here. Now let's go ahead and head into the battle. Heading into the match, I see a team that I more or less expected, although I am very glad not to see Glimmora there. However, Hisuian and Ting-Lu will be quite annoying to take out, so I'm not looking forward to dealing with that, as well as possible webs from Galvantula. I decide to lead with Derp the Quagsire as my opponent leads with Cyclizar, making me wish I had led with King instead. Well. The professor isn't going to be too happy about this, but we've got to take this lizard down. I safely click Ice Beam as my opponent ends up clicking Knock Off, doing a decent chunk of damage and unfortunately knocking off my Rindo Berry, doing a bit of damage, and I in return do some chip with Ice Beam, although not nearly as much as I was hoping for. Had I done some calculations here, I would have found out that this Cyclizar is either extremely specially bulky or this Dragon Lizard is Assault Vested. As a result, during the next turn I opt to click Toxic as my opponent clicks U-turn, basically negating the damage I did to it due to its Regenerator ability, and then they swap into, surprisingly, Spectrier. Getting this thing Toxic is quite nice, as putting this ghastly horse on a timer could prove to be quite beneficial later on. After that, I end up clicking a Recover just to see what Spectrier can do, and we end up actually taking a Tera Blast, surprisingly enough, although that did a lot of damage. But we are thankfully able to fire off the Recover, but it's very clear we need to switch out. So I actually decided to take a calculated risk by sending in Bramblegast next. Now, granted, if my opponent goes for a Shadow Ball or Dark Pulse here, we'll be heavily punished, but Shadow Ball is an even bigger risk for my opponent to click due to Mousehold being in the back, and even Dark Pulse can be risky because of Weavile and Iron Valiant, hence the risky play to get into my opponent's head. And as it turns out, this play pays off as my opponent actually opted to click Tera Blast, dealing exactly 0 hit points of damage to my Tumbleweed and taking even more chip from Toxic, forcing my opponent to switch out fearing a Shadow Sneak. Predicting my opponent to switch out knowing they'll be fearing a Shadow Sneak, I decide to go for a Poltergeist to hopefully reveal a Pokemon's item and deal a decent chunk of damage. However, in hindsight, I should have gone for a Power Whip as Poltergeist wouldn't have done much damage against Ting-Lu and no damage against the normal type Cyclizar, which unfortunately is what comes in, resulting in another turn where nothing happens. In response, I decide to send Dirt back in as my opponent goes for another U-turn, switching out and this time going into Galvantula. This time, fearing either a Grass Move or a Bug Buzz, I decide to switch into Hive Mind the Mousehold as we do outspeed this Galvantula and can punish a Sticky Web with a Tidy Up during the next turn. However, my opponent unfortunately ends up going for a Bug Buzz, doing half of our HP. Fortunately, this does allow me to click Population Bomb for free as my opponent switches out into, unsurprisingly, their Hisuian Goodra. And even though Hisuian Goodra does resist the Population Bomb, we still do nearly half of Goodra's HP, which, not gonna lie, feels quite good. Perhaps I should use Tera Mousehold in the future league. After that, hoping my opponent possibly predicts a switch or even straight up a KO, I decide to go for the low kick, but unfortunately Goodra does end up living in the red and goes for a heavy slam, absolutely smooshing the family of mice and picking up the KO. Not the most ideal, but at least one of the bulkiest Pokemon on my opponent's team is now severely weakened. After the family of mice goes down, I decide to switch in King the Weavile and go for a knockoff as it's extremely free against my opponent's entire team, and unsurprisingly my opponent switches out Goodra and goes into Arcanine hoping to get an Intimidate off. But our Held Clear Amulet prevents our attack from being lowered, and we manage to do a solid half of the Floofy Boys' HP and knocking off their heavy duty boots. Overall, quite nice I must say. Unfortunately, a second knockoff won't KO Arcanine due to its no longer having an item, but I'm also afraid of switching in Quagsire due to this Arcanine possibly having Tera Grass Tera Blast, so after much deliberation, I actually decide to risk it and stay in with King to fire off a triple Axle, as there is a slight chance it could pick up the KO. Well, that sucks. This results in Arcanine getting back to nearly full HP due to Morning Sun, so all that hard work was for nothing and now we're severely on the back foot. This time I do decide to swap out into Quagsire as there's no reason for my opponent not to click a fire move, and that's exactly what my opponent does, clicking Flare Blitz against Derp, doing a small chunk to me as well as itself due to recoil. Deciding to finally see if this pup is in fact rocking the Tera Grass tech, I decide I have to stay in and click Recover. And thankfully we do go unpunished as now it's our turn to recover back to nearly full HP as Galvantula comes back in. Once again, fearing a grass move, I decide to swap into Tumbler, but once again we get hit with a Bug Buzz, and once again, that does over half of my Pokemon's HP. Definitely not ideal. As a result, this time predicting another Bug Buzz, I double out into none other than the Ace Iron Valiant, and we're actually able to take it quite well due to our Quad Resist, and we even get our speed boost from our held Booster Energy. I really should have swapped into First Class the first time. After seeing how much damage Bug Buzz did, I deduced that I will be able to tank a Thunder after a Calm Mind, so that's the button I click, and my opponent ends up firing off a Thunder Wave. Definitely not ideal, but we can still get a very heavy hit off on hopefully at least a couple of Pokemon before going down. And that's exactly what ends up happening as my opponent switches his Electric Bug out into his Goodra, sacking it off to an incoming Moonblast. Hopefully now we'll be able to start making our comeback. Arcanine ends up coming in next, and since we still don't know what Terra type this annoying doggo is, I decide to click the neutral Aura Sphere and pray that we live the incoming Flare Blitz. Well, 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 I'd expect nothing less from the Professor's ace Pokemon. Now we just have to hope you can KO this pup. Well, this is still a trade I will gladly take. While Arcanine is able to pick up the KO with an incoming extreme speed, this gives me an extremely free switch into Tumbler the Bramblegast, as the Shadow Sneak will be able to KO this major threat without taking any damage from extreme speed. However, I correctly predict to switch into Cyclizar and instead go for a Power Whip, doing quite a bit of damage against the speedy lizard. I decide to click Power Whip once again to hopefully deal even more damage against Cyclizar, but unfortunately a knockoff is enough to pick up the KO against our Tumbleweed, knocking off our Heavy Duty Boots and making us lose our only other form of hazard removal. That being said, we won't even need to worry about hazards, as King the Weavile is looking better than ever now that a large margin of my opponent's team is chipped and can't outspeed the King. So I send him in and set up a Swords Dance as my opponent switches out. Alright, I kind of forgot about that. I am really wishing I had Ice Shard at this current moment in time. I had set up the Swords Dance so that I could reliably take out a full HP Ting-Lu, and I was also predicting my opponent to actually hard swap their Cyclizar because I knew that it was really valuable for this endgame. But in hindsight, this was a massive misplay from me, as Ting-Lu was never really a major threat once it was heavily chipped since I had Yanmega and Quagsire still in the back. Regardless, as Arcanine comes in, I have to hope that we can take this incoming extreme speed. And that, my friends, is why he is labeled as the King. Living on 3 HP in a dream, the King is able to simply pick up the KO against Arcanine with a knockoff, which would put us into a fantastic position, but unfortunately the one Pokemon that outspeeds the King comes in, the always terrifying Spectrier. Unsurprisingly, Spectrier goes for the Shadow Ball, which picks up the easy KO against Weavile, raising their special attack to +1 as the King finally falls, and to be quite frank, this might result in my first loss in this league. At least for this season, of course. However, there is still a chance. If Derp can survive a Shadow Ball and fire off an Earth Power, there is an extremely slim chance that Spectrier will die to the building Toxic Chip, and while Yanmega will have to really pull out the big guns, especially against Ting-Lu, there is a chance that with some luck and depending on my opponent's builds, Yanmega could reverse sweep. So as a result, I fire off the Earth Power. Well, I guess that seals our fate. While I learned later on that the crit might not have even mattered, and I would later learn about Cyclizar's Assault Vest and Galvantula being Focus Sashed, meaning that Yanmega wouldn't have been able to reverse sweep anyways, this 0-4 loss really does put a damper on our record. It would have been nice to have made this game a 0-3 or even possibly a 0-2 loss, but unfortunately that wasn't in the cards for us as we take our first loss of the season. Now, surprisingly enough, the professor didn't mind this loss at all, as his main goal is to gather more research on the Iron Mons, and he was able to gather quite a bit more information about Iron Valiant this week, which he heavily valued, and in his mind, this loss helps keep our profile down low. After all, if we go undefeated during an entire regular season, we would develop some pretty big targets on our backs for playoffs, possibly putting all of us, and even our Pokemon, at risk. And while I do agree with that last point, I can't help but be disappointed. I really had the belief that this team could pull off the fabled perfect season, and now due to my bad plays and suboptimal prep, that dream was dashed for the rest of the season. A stain on what could have possibly have been a perfect record. Regardless, that will be the end of this log. If you're still watching, thank you so much for your support. If you guys enjoyed this battle and want to see more, then leave a like, comment, and subscribe as it helps our research on these Iron Mons immensely. I would also like to shout out Gengarheracross' channel as well. His channel and his side of the battle will be linked down below. Please be sure to check it out. GG's again to him for a fantastic battle and a salute for the fantastic prep. Also be sure to check out some of our other Draft League content for more battles from me. If you want to show some support financially and earn some unique perks, then be sure to check out my Ko-Fi link down below as well. With that, this is the end of the log. See you all next week for our Week 5 game. Peace out, mates. Listen, I know, Professor, I just don't like losing. I mean, who does? Yeah, I know it helps keep our cover, but I still want to show off the power this team has together. Not gonna lie, it's almost like I'm starting to form a bond with them. Okay, I got it, Professor. I'll focus on the research like you want. That's all you seem to care about anyways.